over first and to just allow a brief moment to introduce themselves. So I'll hand it over to Kawai. So I'll give it over to you, Kawai.
Hello, everyone. So I co-founded Talent Young Architecture with my husband, David Counters, to drive positive social change. And that has taken us to work with more than 40 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island communities and many more in the Pacific. Our early work included post-disaster development in the Pacific Islands, and those grassroots projects informed the principles that we apply to all our works today that are grounded in respectful two-way learning. Back home in Australia, we've brought those experiences to our work with Indigenous communities, and over the last decade, we've had the privilege to co-create with our First Nations people and draw on their wisdom, their culture, their sustainable practice of caring for country to reconcile a brighter future. Okay, over to you, Erin.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name's Erin McDonald. I'm a Mandurndji woman, so about 6 hours drive from Brisbane City. I've got family connections to Cherbourg and Quandamooka, and I'm a principal at Blacklash. My background's interior design and architecture. Blacklash is a First Nations owned and operated design studio, so we work in collaboration with our traditional custodians and understand the community processes and protocols and how we can drive agency through design processes. And then we also work alongside architecture firms and developers and other clients to help lead those conversations and drive First Nations outcomes to give agency back to our communities.
Thank you, Jan. And we'll hand it now over to Patrick to give us a brief introduction.
My name's Patrick Keane. I'm the Director of Enter Projects Asia. We work principally in Southeast Asia, promoting the design of plant-based materials or alternatives to toxic materials in construction. We work all over from Philippines to India, and our research goes into technology, materials blended into contemporary design, and also an overview of historical methods of construction in this area. So very thrilled to be invited today and meet all of you, and please feel free to ask some questions.
Cool. Thank you, Patrick. And then last but not least, over to Sidhartha from Studio Lotus.
Thank you. I'm Sidhartha from Studio Lotus. We are a studio of about 100 plus people based out of New Delhi, and we are from multiple backgrounds. We are architects, interior designers, textile designers, engineers, working from a small space in Natosarai. In terms of work, we really don't follow a particular typology. We are very fortunate to be working from master plans to interiors to even furniture. I think the entry point for us is the story we seek to tell through the project. And the big part of the story is our process. And our process is very inclusive and intuitive. The work of Studio Lotus is grounded in the principles of conscious design and approach, where we like to celebrate local resources informed by cultural influences and a keen attention to detail. And a big part of our work ongoingly is to engage with the local craftsmen, which is in abundance here. I think I would like to call it Build to Empower, and how we can celebrate our living resources which we have in India, and how we can reinterpret those artisanal skills into our project, which of course also tread into some luxury projects as well. So that's the dialogue we keep on engaging at Studio Lotus. Thank you.
Cool. And thank you. And so here we are with our esteemed panel, and I look forward to our discussion here. And then, as Patrick had mentioned, feel free to forward on any prompts, any questions, any inquiries that you would like to dig deeper into our discussion. And so before we do that, we will kind of structure today's session with a 40-minute discussion covering certain aspects of the industry, of our practice, of our profession, when it comes to matters of sustainability, when it comes to matters of culture, when it comes to matters of activism and architecture. So I look forward to today's session. I look forward to today's exchange. I look forward to today's interlocking kind of discussion and dialogue that happens between what we sense as how we build for the future and what we sense as how we unlock deep wisdom, depending on the places that we work in, depending on the communities that we work for, and how we cross borders between those things. So before we start, today's session starts with a 40-minute discussion followed by a 10 to 15-minute Q&A. If you would like to ask any of our panel or a particular person a question, just please enter it through the Q&A field at the bottom of your screen. So let's truck on ahead. I think we'll kind of dig into our discussion here and into our session. So as we begin, I would like to start off with our first point of discussion, which is what sustainability means today. And so we'll spend the next kind of 8 to 10 minutes discussing that between our panel around what sustainability means today. I want to direct this question firstly towards Erin, perhaps, given she is here speaking as a First Nations person working in the industry and getting her understanding around connection to country, connection to what it means for her to work as a First Nations and as an Aboriginal person within an architectural country. So I'll hand it over to you there, Erin, and explain to us what you think what sustainability means to you today.
Thank you, Vade. So sustainability is a tricky one for me to answer, actually. So I can't see sustainability without seeing caring for country. So having a connection to Aboriginal country here in what we call Australia now, my culture, my family, me, my identity, the health of our land at the current state, where it's potentially going, where it's potentially not going, and it's our people, it's our community. And it's how we are looking after that. And architecture and us as professionals in this field have a huge responsibility to caring for country, and in turn sustainability. So looking at traditional technologies and knowledge systems and how we can bring that back, specifically here in Australia. We haven't done that. We're sort of starting to do that, and it's leading towards, culture and celebrating our culture. But without celebrating our culture, we need to understand what that actually means, specifically in the architectural sense. So we can't do this designing with country without actually understanding what country is, how country talks, how we can feel country, how country responds to what we do to it. So, in an architectural sense, in my line of work, I sort of drive this understanding community processes, but understanding and talking to the right people within the community as well. So people that can read country and look after country, and then how we can respond and be a vehicle for change in that space as architectural design professionals. So, if a building is floods there, how come we can't just keep we need to let that flood there, because it needs to flood for a reason, right? We can't keep putting up these barriers in architecture. We need to start, like, countries talking to us, and I think we all need to get into tune with that as well. So, through material choices, what materials can we select and can we use that can actually go back, can purely and truly be broken down and returned to country. Traditional ways of living on the land, they never use more materials than they needed. As well. So if we really sort of embody those traditional methodologies and think innovatively through how we practice design, and push those boundaries beyond sort of the Western worldview that we're currently in tune with, I guess, But yeah, it's inherent in our human nature to want more as well, right? Want something that looks good, especially in design. We talk to designers, and it's an aesthetic thing, and that has a place. But the way I sort of view and practice design, it's the process is the outcome. We don't know what that outcome is going to be unless we go through this process of engaging with our communities, our people, and understanding exactly where that site is and everything that is encompassed with that, and then how we build sustainably on that. That's probably my response to that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, Erin. And I think, I suppose, what is sustainable design and architecture? But how can architects in kind of today's age really incorporate sustainable design principles? So you speak about country, you speak about deep listening, but I suppose it's on a deeper level, or on deep listening to the land, to the waterways.
Yeah.
And I wonder, just redirecting this to the likes of you, Sidhartha, given your place in the world and given your background, what do you see kind of as ways of working with the land? What's your experience? What's your ongoing process and really creating that kind of relationship when we build, but really speaks to the land that you build on, given your place and given your place in the world?
So for us, fundamentally, sustainability isn't really a feature which can be attributed to a project. I think it is really like an attitude which for us underlines the whole design process. And we are very conscious about what you said about building in our country and our region, building ecologically, socially and culturally. And we kind of introspect at every stage. So probably even what Erin mentioned earlier, for us in India has diverse geographies. We start from the north with the mountains, and towards the south there are different climatic zones. So engaging with different context becomes very important, because there are different geographies and climatic zone, and then how really to engage and create the principles of architecture of building in those regions. So where we engage is, while as architects we are used to building this envelope and we keep on building, but I think we keep on probing how we can push this envelope further. And to your specific point, I would like to probably highlight a project which we are working in the Himalayas, in the north part of India. And we are meant to do a large, it's like a gated community for villas for people to come and stay. But the first, we didn't really get on with the act of building. The first few years, almost 4 to 5 years, we just spent in ecologically restoring the land, in really preserving the land, in really healing the land, you can say. So what I mean by that is, we really map out our over 100-acre parcel. We map out our waterways, our water channels, and we kind of created check dams and retention ponds to really bring the water table up. So to ensure that can we be free of water in that region, how we can preserve water, and then how we can tread lightly on the ground. And we did minimal cut and fill. We used sustainable techniques like bamboo engineering to restore the cut and fill. So it's going beyond the normal act of building. It is like really probing further that how we can minimize our impact on the soil, and how in a way we can heal that land before we really get into the act of building. And probably that's how we approach each and every project of ours, and probably find an opportunity. And this actually happens with a lot of engagement with the client. In our country, we have to really engage and have a conversation with the client and the community probably to create that dialogue. And that's how we find success in our work. Engaging with clients becomes very important for us.
Yeah, I absolutely echo with what Erin and Sidhartha said. I think there's this view it should be all-encompassing. And for us, it includes environmental, which is normally what the term sustainability it comes to someone's mind, but it's also social, financial, and cultural. It means the wellness of our planet. And in a lot of our work, we try try to look at things from a regenerative angle. So we've been very lucky to learn from our traditional owners the intricate relationships between different flora, fauna, and the well-being of the land and waterways. So we've tried to repair and restore by planting endemic species en masse and look at the best biohabitat we could create. And also the other thing I think you touched on is that sometimes it means building less or not to build at all. So I think in all our projects we sort of look at things in terms of materializing. For example, in our Rammed Earth Health Clinic, we need to link two wings of the building together. Normally it means a roof and a covered indoor area, but we just completely opened it and allow the space to be open to the staff. It becomes a very attractive communal hub for the community. We also planted a lot of trees that mimic what the original habitat might be like. Sometimes it doesn't work, especially in an urban setting, but for that project it worked really a treat. And then, you know, the easy thing, of course, is on-site energy generation. In Australia, we are so blessed with abundance of solar. So, for example, that project, just the PV panels itself allowed to generate 15% more energy in the Newman postcode. So that was really quite astonishing. We think overall there's a really sweet spot where when we look at the wisdom from traditional owners and the vernacular and the engineering, and then combining that with first world Western engineering.
Cool, thank you, Kawai. So I think, yeah, just to round this up, I think there's really a shared dialogue around just the unique relationship that we have with the land. And I think it's one that is primarily influenced by the principle of reciprocation, and that this shall, you know, continue in the way that we build. And when you look at a building, you should be able to say that the people who designed this have cared for the landscape. You know, the hills, the trees, the natural environment, the country. You know, our care and our consideration towards the land has guided our outcomes. I want to just move forward onto our next item, and just to kind of grow the discussion. So our next item here is just to focus on how social sustainability. So how social sustainability has affected design. How social sustainability affects design when it is incorporated into architecture. So perhaps I want to just direct this question to Patrick, who I know has a strong interest in that kind of post-COVID attitude, that idea of design and resilience, and how you have kind of looked at ways of adapting and creating ways of design that work in this kind of post-COVID era that we're working in. So for you, Patrick, perhaps we can start with you. How does that question of how social sustainability affect design when it is incorporated into architecture?
Yeah, very good question. Could talk about it. Could make a whole conference about that particular question. But you know, we started in small steps, like everyone else. We were doing you know, things like yoga studios in you know, in urban environments, and this is you know, a little 3D printed model of a large pod, a yoga pod, and a small one, bringing very, very organic conditions, or you know, that sort of forms from nature rather than forms from a built environment, and then dovetailing it with, you know, an arts and crafts attitude of making and fabricating. So what you see here is a sample of rattan, and you can see the hand-tied knots, which is something you can't get from traditional methods of construction. You need somebody that's you know, got an arts and crafts background to do that. In terms of you know, social input, we get asked all the time, what's our competition? We don't have any competition. The only competition we have is the importation of inferior plastic products from people purchasing it off the internet. We know the people that make this. They are highly skilled arts and crafts people. We've saved 3 factories. We employ over 45 to 50 artisans, and we dovetail that very, very closely with our designs. So we design, we reciprocate with them, and now we have a whole sort of structure of design that is, very, very much more back and forth with the fabrication. The projects have got larger through demands. I mean, it's just, wellness was quite a small industry when we started. Now it's growing to, our work in an airport. And so, socially, that sends a big message to the community as a whole of what designers and their roles should be in design, but also all the way through to construction, how those aesthetics can start to implement and be influenced by forms in nature from an aesthetic standpoint, and then how do you actually complete that picture to work with more plant-based materials, reducing structure, reducing weight, economy of materials, working with indigenous principles. Indigenous principles here are all those things. Less is more. That's a very, very old architect statement. Really, really going back to that and reshaping what design is for the 21st century, for how we proceed culturally moving forward.
Yeah, so it's a very kind of, in terms of working with the community around that idea of passing the pencil, holding the pencil, being able to work from the ground, I think is a very topical item and issue of today in our practice. Kawai, I think you've got an interesting background in terms of the sectors that you work in. And I know that, you have experience in navigating community and connecting with stakeholders. I wonder if you're able to extend on that.
Yeah, so a lot of our principles are underpinned by our early project in a post-disaster setting. So every single dollar that gets put into the project needs to be translated into something that's positive and impactful. So, for example, one of the key things we do is we make sure all the projects, we're not only looking at the physical outcome, but the social outcome is just as important, if not more. So we provide training and employment for the communities as much as possible. A good example is the Takara School that we designed in Vanuatu, where we adopted a local vernacular style timber frame building using predominantly local material, but to the specification of local engineering standards. And then it's designed to empower communities to make use of locally available resources and skills. The community infilled and on load-bearing walls of local stone, they weave the windows, and instead of using metal roof sheets, we paid local women to weave the roof out of sago leaves. And this provided livelihood to mothers who could then spend their money on the children. And we also provide training to local people so they have the skills not just to repair or maintain the building, but then to also build new ones in the long run. So, for example, we've been doing a series of water and sanitation projects on Ranunga Island in the Solomons, and we've been working pro bono since 2007, and it's a good example of the multiplying effect. So we've trained some of their dear friends, and then now they're leading the team to deliver new water and sanitation projects with input from us and our engineers. So now that program's been rolled out to all the other villages on the island, and we've almost been to all the villages there.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I think just...
sorry, one more thing.
Over to you.
In terms of procurement as well, I think even in Australia there are lots of ways to actually increase local participation as much as possible. So one example is the aged care centre we've just completed in East Arnhem Land. We engaged the nursery owned by the local Aboriginal corporation to collect the endemic seed and propagate them early on, even before construction began. And also these buildings were cladded in 20 linear kilometres of downstream bark timber that were savaged from the nearby mining site, and they're milled by the local Gumatj Aboriginal Corporation. So it allows project funding to better support local community and employment.
Yeah, and I think there's a big discussion around broad outcomes when we want to engage with the community, and I think reflecting, the built environment, reflecting the community within the built environment. There is a big and a major and a significant method of working that I think still requires change. And I'm pretty interested in you, Sidhartha, around how you kind of see that change, perhaps around, working within India, and working within your own community, which I know that you're very, you're very experienced in, and the way that you've created an ongoing process and creating, a method of craft, perhaps, that does really speak to the people that you work with. There's an element of kind of picking up on the kind of traditional way of building, but we all know that things are changing, they're adapting in the way that we build for our communities. Our communities are always intergenerational. I wonder if there's anything that you can kind of extend on in terms of the way that you work, given your own community, given your own place, given your own sense of people that you work in today.
Picking up on what Kawai said, for us, the aspect of social sustainability is still, I would say, still an emerging concept. It's still not probably as wide and kind of acceptable, I would say, especially in the market or the segment we work in. And I think we demonstrated it through, especially a project in the governance. So imagine a typical government building in a country like ours it works in silos, and it's a typical office. And what we were able to engage with them is to broaden an aspect and create a layer of social and community into that aspect, where actually we were able to lift the ground plane and allow the people to come into the building. So it's almost engaging with the city and the building. And then we were able to create actually communal spaces. This was a farmers center, and we were able to create community spaces, shaded areas, where actually farmers and the people of the city can come and engage. This was in Bhubaneswar. We were able to actually create a cafe. We were able to create an auditorium, where again schools and children from the schools can come and run their program, because otherwise, the building is like a shut mechanism, and we were able to give that connection. And in fact, to add to that, we were able to create, probably I would say the first time, to create an art and craft package for that building. So as a metaphor of the building, we were able to engage with the craftsmen at an architectural scale. So we were working with the local materials and local condylite, local laterite, and we were able, it was an opportunity to give livelihood to about 60 craftsmen, even more, for a period of 6 to 8 months, where they actually worked all outside the building, within the building, working with all close by resources, close by materials, and they were able to create stories into the building. So carvings, imagine, screens and jalis in stone, creating the crop field patterns onto the buildings, creating patterns on the floor. So we were able to engage with the community and the local craftsmen and bring him into the building level, and stories be told. And I think that was a dialogue which started in a government project, and more and ongoingly we keep on doing that any given opportunity we get. So that's how we are able to engage, as I mentioned earlier, the huge abundance of resources and the craft and the beauty of the craft, and how it can be ingrained into the building. It may not be perfect. The imperfections of the craft actually makes the beauty of the building to us. And that's the dialogue we keep on having.
Well, thank you.
And Sidhartha, that gives sort of community ownership over that building too, right? Like, and it breaks down that barrier between community and government, essentially, and really, really creates a sense of place. which is a really beautiful thing to do through architecture. I think it's really, really important. Yeah.
In that sense,
especially
of
for
kind of
government
ownership.
project is what I mentioned. Yeah, especially for government.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So just moving on to our next point, and I'm going to keep it with you, Erin, just doing the full loop here, and just bringing us to the next question, which is how does culture contribute to a sustainable life, town, city, and country? So I just want to do the full loop and direct that question to you there, Erin. I know that there's something around how we acknowledge kind of that idea of First Nations first peoples first. Perhaps you can extend on what that looks like for you for tomorrow's place and for tomorrow's town, city, and country.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that's sort of, it's relationships, and everything we do is built off relationships, understanding that we are all here in Australia is on stolen land, and that's basically how we start all of our projects, conversations, pieces. So it's about our people, and it's about preserving our culture for preserving our identity. So it's, and through sustainability, it's creating those impacts. So we build into our fees, sort of saying what Kawa was saying, like it's so important that projects can be a vehicle for that change as well, right? That we have relationships with our local traditional custodian groups here, and we build a fee in there because we want to be able to give back to them, knowing that we are building on their country, on their land. So they don't have to do anything. It's just to say, like, we are doing this, we are tearing up your country, and that's sort of a way of giving back, and that's that relationship piece as well. We started a sort of a forum where funds are coming into that. So then when we do pro bono work, we can offer our sort of design skill sets and everything like that. But when it gets to the point where they need money to do things that they want to do within the community as well, we can offer up money for that as well. So that's all about the sustainable life for our communities, and sort of helping elevate them to do things that they want as well. There's a huge problem at the moment in the architecture industry of cultural fatigue. To me, that's not a sustainable life. Like we are pulling it on our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people for their knowledge, but without sort of offering any support outside of that. Like we're still in this notion of taking their culture, taking their identity, taking their stories, and kind of running with that. And I guess that's we're a bit of a catalyst for that, being a intermediate of trying to navigate that space. We're in the middle of that, and really trying to understand and educate and create awareness around that as well, that everything that we're engaging with our traditional custodians and the broader Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, that they have full-time jobs as well, and we're making them do all this other work on top of that. But then they have those, they're caring for their communities. There's other problems as well, their families. So it's really just understanding all of that. And then that comes back down to relationships, breaking down those barriers of professionalism as opposed to just a personal relationship, and how we can work from that way. Yeah, and I think there's a big question mark on cultural safety when it comes to working with our traditional knowledge holders, storytellers, and our people that that do come from the ground and working with the people from the ground. So I think like where culture sits, it's really around given our place in the world that we work in. I suppose the idea of custodianship kind of springs to mind. How do we create a safe space
a custodianship when we work with the people, who live in the towns that we work. And I just want to kind of spring this around maybe to you, Kawai, around your experiences around working with Indigenous projects. I know, you've worked with Indigenous projects in Australia and the Pacific, and how your practice creates and works with different perspectives and backgrounds, and your idea of being culturally inclusive in whichever project that you're working in.
Yeah, so one of the things about reciprocity is that we focus on project types that have a direct positive impact in empowering the community so that the culture can continue to thrive and not be displaced by the forces of globalization. And in doing so, then, everyone can actually sustain the culture and flourish. So, for example, when we deliver culturally appropriate aged care and health clinics, it allows elders to age on country with dignity and also be able to pass on their knowledge to younger generation and set a, example and a role model, instead of having, which often happens, is to go to major towns and cities for treatment and be cut off from the community. By delivering art and cultural centre, that contributes to the continuation of cultural expressions and also sometimes strengthen the intergenerational connection. So the kids can actually learn from the elders, etc., etc. We also find that art is a fantastic way to embed culture and stories into our projects. So, for example, the Rammed Earth Health Hub I mentioned, we got 19 artists representing the 5 communities that the Health Hub actually serves. And by doing so, we unite the communities and in a way that's relevant to each of the groups. And sometimes there might be like little interesting findings. For example, in the aged care centre we were working on, in discussion, we discovered that they would like to use landscape as a way of wayfinding. So there are species that are associated with women, and so we plant those yams for areas that are for women, and that enhances their wayfinding strategy for what often could be a place for dementia patients, for dementia elderly.
Yeah. Thank you, Kawai. Thank you, Erin. And so, just to move into our next item, and I think will be our kind of a last point of discussion here, and I'm looking at you, Patrick, delving into the realm of technology, including AI and other transformative tools that are really affecting sustainable architecture and driving change. And given your background, Patrick,
really nice actually to bringing
just to keep it on you there, is given your background around this idea of forward-thinking approach to design, where you are forever taking new technologies and fusing them with traditional craftsmanship. How do you want to kind of look into that kind of item on technology, things that are forever changing, they're vastly changing at a rapid pace, that are affecting the way that we build today, and how they kind of driving change within your practice, within the way that you design, within the way that you build?
Okay, well, I'm holding a ball here that's been made by somebody. It's actually a football. It's a prototype to the modern football that the kids play with. And in here is an inherent amount of technology right here, structure. The person that makes this has 5 generations of arts and crafts skill. And so, culture, the last point comes into this point as well. What we're doing is we're taking this person's skills, take it to the market and sell it. We're taking that and putting his skills into an overtly social setting or overtly commercial setting, namely with a project like this, which is the same weaving pattern, weaving design, This is a pod for the new Bangalore airport. It's 650 meters in size, so you can see the similarity, and it calls us into questioning if we're going to work with regional design and structure, how can we incorporate that into something much more large scale? Then it's dovetailing it with hybrid materials. So you've got a piece of bamboo here, but it's fused together and laminated to be stronger than steel. In terms of technology, it starts with 3D modeling and ideas, but also with the context, very, very strong context within which we're working. And to us, blending this and this together is the answer. This is just as important as this. And I think for us to continue on a large-scale construction as a community, we have to reduce waste. We have to reduce materials that are onerous on the environment, like concrete, or work with structural efficiencies. And sometimes that really does mean going back to basics. Do conventional methods of building, straight walls and things have all the answers? Well, we're finding slowly but surely that they don't. And we're able to luckily moderate that process and enhance that process as we are starting to work on very large scale projects. We're also working with a lot of 3D printing of corals. So we'll take an example of a coral reef here, and in Thailand there's a whole culture of reef regeneration. How do we take a structure like this and turn it into something that's actually a prototype for a building module to be printed out of coral? And I mean, the list goes on and on. This porous material is incredibly strong. It's a piece of coral from nature. It highly influences our work. It's very, very lightweight, incredibly strong. How do we start to deploy ideas in nature, behaviors in nature, structures in nature, to bring back going around full circle, to introduce concepts into urban environments or suburban environments that are more pleasing to the human being. There's a saying in French, being away from nature makes you hard. I read it somewhere, and it was related to the airport. It hardens you. So we're trying to soften our experiences in design, of the experiences that we design and sell to people, to market to people. So that there are just a few examples that we're working with. We work with an overtly non-linear process and more of a lexicon of ideas. So we do have a structure, but it's just not, regimented or rigid. Obviously, we work 8 hours a day, more or less, 7 days a week, 8 days a week. So we work with, time frames and, regimented, efficiencies and things. But I think there's a lot to be said for looking around into existing cultures, arts and crafts, examples from nature, and how we embrace technology and deploy that for the future to make our work really send a message for the future of design.
Yeah, and thank you, Patrick. And I'm going to just leave this open for the next maybe few minutes to anyone. And I think there's something around technology. I think there's something around the use of artificial intelligence, changing the way that we think in architecture. And I'm going to leave it open for the table here for the next few minutes around anyone's thoughts on what are the 5 ways or, whatever ways that AI will change architecture. And I wonder whether AI has the potential to change architecture. I think the answer is yes, and we would argue that change is happening as we talk through this panel. Perhaps I'll leave it open now for AI how is it kind of already making headway in the architectural processes and systems that we've known and used for decades? So I'll leave that open for the next few minutes for anyone.
Well, I can say something small. I don't want to keep going, but AI in a way produces the end. It's a result that you see at the end. So if the end is the beginning, then it would encourage a much more cyclical process in design. Just forget about the ingredients per se. It always produces a result at the very beginning. So we're studying the product, AI, what it can do with mid-journey and things, but also just that cyclical process in design when the end is the same as the beginning. That's incredibly thought-provoking for us.
I would like to add, it's like the West is used to the maximum, probably you can say the maximum technology with the minimum human intervention. And I think in a context in a country like ours, with a huge repository of skilled and semi-skilled labor and craftsmen, I think probably even what Patrick was saying, we have to really blend and create a hybrid of typologies going further, because I don't think in a country like ours we'll ever be able to leave that human touch or that hand touch, like building by hand. But what we ongoingly engage in is that how we can engineer it better with all the localized nuances of the craft, and how we can still make it into a better product. And I would just like to, a small instance, we were doing a project for a hotel, and we were facing the west facade, which has deep sun during the day, but during the night we have to open it up to look into the view of the beautiful fort. So we tried many techniques, we tried many hardwares, German hardware, but all it happened through our own indigenous sliding system, where actually we were able by hand to open up almost a lattice like a jali, which is weighing 400 kilos. And only by doing it over there, by working through the local people, we were able to create that product, rather than trying to, understand different hardware systems. And all I can say in a country like ours, it will be this experimentation, which I think the endeavor is to make it better and better, but it will need that involvement of how we can engage with our people and our country and our, ideas, and then take it up further.
Cool.
I don't know, I wasn't able to answer the AI part, but just to add to the technical.
Yeah. I suppose
I
it's...
think for what I would...
Look, you go ahead, Kalway, sorry.
I think for what I would really love to see is the optimization of materials, because in terms of sustainability, there's so much waste, so much extraction, so much destruction. Like right now we see the application of AI a lot in terms of generating images or like fabrication technique, but what I would really love to see is like genuine optimization into the material, so we reduce waste as much as possible, and also to allow, like what Patrick said, an effective evaluation process that can actually feed back when we start a new project, the next round.
Yeah. Thank you. So I suppose there's a few ways there that technology like AI is starting to impact the way that we design and think. But before we've got 10 minutes left, and I would just like to kind of round up and close this up with our Q&A session. We've got a few questions that have come in from the audience, and I think just spending over the next 5 minutes or so, we'll just touch base with our audience questions. And I've got a question here, which is open to anyone really. I think this is an open question, but it's how cultural diversity plays a vital role in design. This person has asked, how could you share examples of how you successfully integrated local customs, traditions, or even perhaps religious aspects into architectural projects?
At least it doesn't come across
like,
so I don't know. Obviously, it's not on this list.
So I'll leave that open for anyone there to send in their 2 cents?
I could probably say something to that. So talking to the sort of integrated local, so talking to sort of the process that we go through is we engage specifically with the traditional custodian groups who has the cultural authority to make decisions about that place, about that country, specifically where the site will be. We do a bit of a research, so we kind of call it cultural mapping. So we try to understand the culturally significant sites beyond that site and beyond that site, because it's all interconnected. And then that will start to inform the form and the orientation of the architecture, and start sort of designing that way and integrating that. So like those view corridors and all of those kind of aspects, we understand, you know, the site-specific narrative, and if there's any traditional stories specifically that is appropriate to use, we unpack that, understanding the cultural nuances and what that story means. Again, that's that translation piece, as an Indigenous designer, knowing what that is and how we can sort of do an innovative outcome, but also build in those economic opportunities. So we always draw on our local, our broader community, so whether they're artists, local fabricators, and always go to those First Nations businesses first and build that into the project as well. So again, it might not necessarily be an aesthetic outcome, but we give those economic opportunities as well to our broader communities. It's never just us. And, you know, one project we gave, you know, we brought on 12 different weavers, artists, and they worked collaboratively with local manufacturers to sort of drive those design outcomes as well. We kind of think of it like we kind of put it together, but then we pull it apart and it's all little different projects as well. And that's a really good way to do it, because then that will come back together in the end as well. So that's a really, really successful outcome, I guess, from my aspect anyway.
Yeah, thank you. And one other question that's come from the audience, and we'll leave this for the next few minutes, is this is coming from the audience, is that they hear many efforts for sustainability through local artisans, but how can we globally implement such actions in large projects like airports and shopping centres where local artisans might struggle to meet the demand or leave impact on a global scale? I might direct that to you there, Patrick, given your recent experience.
Well, we're working on an airport now, and we started working, you know, very small scale with, you know, yoga studios and interiors and things when wellness was, you know, a pocket industry. Now it's really got into the mainstream. Some answers of where we work with local artisans. That's what we do with that project entirely. There's not a piece of it not made by a local artisan based in Southeast Asia with you know, five generations of arts and crafts and of weaving. Okay, so we've pushed them to different you know, limits, from making baskets or chairs and tables or, you know, these things, to making, you know, giant structures for airports. And what we've realized is that with all due respect, that, you know, they're incredibly intelligent people because they're arts and crafts people. So they're skilled and trained and can analyze situations more than what we would have expected. So it's sometimes about empowering people. It's about giving them a challenge and saying, instead of making a basket this big, let's make it that big. Obviously, we have our procedures and our systems that we've made up as we've gone along, and they're very rigorous. And we take pride in you know, a lot of logistics, the non-creative side of the business that makes it all happen. We're very tireless with that. But at the end of the day, the short answer is empowering people. That's it. Empowering an arts and crafts person. Arts and crafts kind of feels to some people a little bit old-fashioned. Like it's something that we, used to, consider a bit more in the olden days. That sort of thing. Patchworks and weaving and all that stuff. No, it's not. It's about embracing the latest technology. It's about working with, age-old materials or techniques. Ancient bricks. Rattan, bamboos, all these kinds of things, and fast forwarding it into the modern world, which are the hot points right now in building and in construction, and we're seeing huge inroads in reducing waste, empowering people, giving projects context, importing less, not going on the internet all the time. Not going to catalogs, actually finding something that's from the back door to come up with a solution. And in some cases, those solutions are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. That's the short answer. But yeah, empowering people is the way forward.
Cool. Thank you, Patrick. So I think we're now here. We have less than 3 minutes remaining. And so perhaps the last word from our panel, and just taking these last 2 minutes from each person, just to go around the circle here, just to give one statement, is how do we ensure that social sustainability plays an integral part of design? So if you can work that in through one statement, and we can wrap it up from there. So I'll start with you there, Erin. If you can just start with that.
Yeah, mine would be taking the ownership out of design. So, that's basically it.
Ownership of design. So move it over to you there, Kawai. What's your statement?
I think it's the intent. If this is something that is also the way we frame design thinking as well. If this is inherently what you want to achieve, then it will happen. You can persuade everyone around the project and your collaborators, client, whatever, to make the outcome.
Cool. Thank you, Kawai. And then over to you there, Sidhartha. What's your statement?
I think for me, it will be like rethink, regenerate, like reuse, revitalize. I think all of these words come to my mind when it comes to the social and the culture aspect of the kind of work we are doing. It's really like regeneration and readaptations for me, especially in a context like ours. That would come to my mind.
Thank you, Sidhartha. And maybe reimagine. And then over to you there, Patrick. What's your statement?
Well, design has to represent culture, and it has to maintain relevance.
Relevance. Cool. Thank you. And so I think we're now at the end of our session here. So firstly, I want to thank our panel here. So Kawai, Erin, Patrick, Sidhartha, and to our audience as well. I want to thank everyone here. And I think it's been a very valuable and a great discussion on a very important topic as we continue to work as practitioners within each in our own place and each within our own sense of people and community. So thank you, everyone, and I'm just going to close it off there.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you. Meet everyone in person one day.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks, guys.
That is the time.